Good morning. I'm Vladimir Jutia in Times Square.
And I'm Anne-Marie Green in Studio 57. We continue to follow breaking news this morning out of the Middle East. Air and missile strikes hit Gaza for the third straight night as Israel retaliates for the surprise attack Hamas launched on Saturday.
The number of dead on both sides has risen to more than 1,600, and the White House says at least 11 Americans have been killed.
And the Biden administration said that while Iran is, quote, broadly complicit in supporting Hamas and other Palestinian militant groups, it hasn't seen any evidence that Tehran had a role in Saturday's attack. President Biden will address the nation later today.
And we begin our coverage with CBS senior foreign correspondent Holly Williams. She's on the ground in Israel with a look at the efforts to find survivors in the rubble and the response from Prime Minister Netanyahu. Holly, good morning.
Good morning. Israel is expected to launch a ground invasion of the Gaza Strip in the days ahead. Its military says it's massed 35 battalions in areas close to the border with Gaza. And last night, Hamas threatened to execute the hostages that it's holding. Israeli airstrikes are hammering the Gaza Strip. Israel says it's targeting Hamas, which it and the US designate as a terrorist group. Palestinian officials say more than 700 people have been killed, including children. In the town of Khan Yunis, Palestinians dug through the rubble with their bare hands in a search for survivors. Israel's ordered a total siege of the Gaza Strip, with no food, fuel or medicine for its residents.
Though Israel didn't start this war, Israel will finish it.
Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu promised his people they would have vengeance.
Hamas will understand that by attacking us, they've made a mistake of historic proportions. We will exact a price that will be remembered by them and Israel's other enemies for decades to come.
The terrorist attack.
Yaqub Biton is the mayor of one of the districts close to Israel's border with the Gaza Strip that's been targeted by Hamas with barrages of rockets. What do you want your government to do? What do you want your military to do?
It's not my job. They know what to do. They know what to do.
It's been 3 days since Hamas gunmen launched an incursion deep into Israel's territory, slaughtering civilians wherever they found them. More than 100 people were killed at the Be'eri kibbutz alone, a small farming community now steeped in blood. Israel says around 1,500 militants have been killed on its land. And Hamas also took hostages. They claim over 100 of them, including women, children and the elderly. Now chips the militants can use in a game of deadly blackmail. Last night, via this audio message, Hamas threatened to kill one of the hostages every time Israel bombs Palestinian civilians without warning, also threatening to broadcast it on video. Newly released Hamas propaganda shows the militants training for their unprecedented assault. There are still big questions here about how Israeli intelligence failed to detect the planning for such a massive attack. There have also been deadly exchanges of fire between Israel and the Hezbollah militant group along this country's northern border with Lebanon. A Pentagon official says the US is deeply concerned about that becoming a second front in this conflict. Anne-Marie.
All right, Holly, thank you. So joining me now for more on all of this from Israel is CBS News foreign correspondent Imtiaz Tyab. As I understand it, Imtiaz, we weren't sure if we were going to get you on the phone or in front of a camera. It's sort of touch and go. What's the situation like where you are right now?
Yeah, Marie, over the last, well, really 10 or 15 minutes, there's been a barrage of rockets that were intercepted above here in Tel Aviv, which, as you can imagine, is pretty far from Gaza. And it really just underscores the fact that that really tense situation at the south of the border is still affecting many other parts of Israel as well, as both Israel and Hamas continue to be locked in this bitter battle. It is, of course, extremely tense, not only here, but as we've been saying in the south of the country, which really has just suffered so enormously after Hamas launched that frankly shocking attack in so many different areas, 22 different areas, and as we've been hearing in Holly's report, killing over 900 people. Anne-Marie.
And so at this point, what is the expectation in terms of how things will unfold? Could we be seeing a full Israeli ground invasion of Gaza at some point?
Yeah, well, as we've been reporting, dozens of Israeli battalions have been mobilizing along the Gaza perimeter fence. We also know that around 300,000 Israelis have volunteered to be reservists. These are staggering numbers for a relatively small country. We've been hearing directly from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who we understand spoke with President Biden to say that they had no choice but to launch a ground invasion. But this, of course, is all complicated by the fact that over 100 Israelis and potentially those with other nationalities, including U.S., are being held inside Gaza right now. We understand that they are scattered all across the coastal enclave, which is really about, twice the size of Washington, D.C., which is to say not a huge space. It is a densely populated area, and there's a huge amount of concern for those people. Anne-Marie.
So at this point, Imtiaz, there are so many questions as to, how Hamas was able to pull this off, but also why now? Is it a matter of something significant occurring now, or just the feeling by Hamas that this was the best time to be as successful as possible?
Yeah, I was talking to an Israeli analyst today who didn't call it the $1 million question. He called it the $1 billion question as to why Hamas chose now, but more importantly, how Hamas was able to do this. How Israel's incredibly powerful intelligence agencies had no inkling whatsoever. Again, you heard in Holly's report, 1,500 Hamas fighters have been found dead. The sheer number of people involved in this is just extraordinary. And the short answer, Anne-Marie, is we just don't know.
Right, Imtiaz. Well, those questions will continue to be asked. Thank you so much. John Kirby of the National Security Council joined CBS Mornings earlier today, and he addressed the hostage situation in Israel and if there are any Americans among those hostages.
The safety and security of American citizens overseas is a top priority for President Biden. You've seen us act as swiftly and efficiently as we can to get Americans home who have been held hostage overseas. We're not going to lose focus on this. But again, I can't confirm that Americans are actually among the hostages this morning. We're still trying to get more information about that.
So I want to bring in CBS News intelligence and national security reporter Olivia Gazis to talk a little bit more about this part of it. What can the U.S. government do to assist any Americans being held in Israel?
Sure, Anne-Marie. Well, the first step is, of course, identifying those key questions of how many, who, and exactly where they are. And there's already a lot of legwork being done across American agencies, from the FBI to the State Department, on that front. But then there's this, of course, the crucial question of what it will take to secure their freedom, which is going to principally involve talking to regional governments who talk to Hamas. And CBS News' Margaret Brennan has confirmed that the Qatari government is already in contact with Hamas to try to negotiate the release of these hostages. As you've seen from John Kirby just there, officials have been reluctant to publicly offer numbers or even national identities, not least because it could give Hamas indications of who is the most valuable, quote unquote, and cause them to either heighten their demands or harshen their treatment of those people. But the fact that officials are not outright denying that Americans are among those detained at this stage is a likely indicator that some number is being held.
So do we know if the Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, has been in contact with Israeli allies?
Yes, Secretary Blinken has absolutely been working the phones with counterparts on a range of fronts. One, he's got to shore up and align Western and allied governments with whom the U.S. is going to be working now to provide material, logistical, and ultimately political support to Israel, especially as the fighting intensifies and becomes more gruesome in Gaza. Two, he's going to be engaging any regional government with leverage, again, the Qataris, Emiratis, the Saudis, to work the hostage issue. These are governments that have served as mediators in the past for sensitive situations and are going to be key interlocutors going forward in striking any sort of deal that there is to be struck. And three, he's also going to be asking these regional governments to pressure other actors in the region, chiefly Lebanese Hezbollah and other radical elements elsewhere, not to escalate the situation, not to pile on in order to limit the potential for an even broader regional spillover of this war.
So, as you know, there are still many, many questions about how this happened. How or why Hamas was able to get around Israeli intelligence, whether or not this was a failure of intelligence by the Israeli military. What assistance can the U.S. provide when it comes to intelligence in this conflict?
Sure. Well, the U.S. shares a lot of intelligence with the Israelis already, especially on areas of mutual interests like Iran. In this case, you could see how some resources could be surged or accelerated, not unlike they have been in Ukraine, and especially where the Israelis might have some gaps. So you could imagine, for example, if the Israelis need some enhanced overhead imagery of a potential target, and the U.S. has a particular satellite capability that can do that, that could be shared in an accelerated fashion. There could be enhanced signals intelligence sharing, tracking calls and texts being exchanged to try to determine the chatter about what next steps here are. And of course, as we've heard, there's already some furious forensic analysis going in to determine whether there was direct Iranian involvement in orchestrating or ordering these attacks. There's no evidence that American officials have said has emerged of that yet, but it's ultimately going to be a key factor in shaping the overall Israeli and the global response here.
Olivia, thank you very much.